Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a little bit after 10:30, time for the Natural Resources our subcommittee to get up and going. Kyle, would you please take the roll?
Vice Chairman Darby. Representative Fritz. Chairman Grills.
Here.
Representative Holsey. Representative Jones. Representative Reedy. Representative Shaw. Representative Todd. Representative Travis. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Kyle. And if you all would, please stand. Chairman Darby is going to lead us in the pledge and the prayer.
Salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, we come to you with open arms, dear Lord. Thankful for the beautiful day you've given us, dear Lord. Thank you for the protection you gave Representative Whitson this morning, dear Lord, and the other people there that was involved in the wreck. Dear Lord, please be with Mr. Don Ridgway as they're airlifted him to Nashville, dear Lord. Just put your protective hand on him and his family. Forgive us where we failed you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
As we're getting started here, are there any personal orders? And Chairman Darby, the man you mentioned in your prayer, constituent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, former representative, his son, John Penn Ridgway, is mayor of Henry County.
Okay.
But good a family as it comes.
Okay. Thank you for mentioning that. Representative Fritz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's at great risk to my health that I would welcome my wife of 40 years here and thank her for coming. And she's going to be helping us with our nuclear and innovative energy today. So I'm sure y'all will see her up there if you get a chance to go by at 2:30.
Fantastic, fantastic. Anyone else? Tyler, you have any wisdom for the day?
Good morning, everyone. Today's words of wisdom are from an American legend, an Alabama grad, a Vietnam veteran who won the Medal of Honor. He was a skilled tennis player and owner of the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, Forrest Gump. There's only so much fortune a man really needs, and the rest is just for showing off. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you for that. Seeing no other personal orders, we'll get started with our calendar. And as a point of privilege, I saw Chairman Terry walk in. We'll just take him out of order so he can get back to his office and meet with his constituents, if that's okay with the committee. Have a motion and a second on House Bill 2079. Chairman Terry, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Committee, and thank you for the words of wisdom. And I bring to you not a solid waste bill today.
Good to see you too.
So currently, the Veterinary Medical Practice Act does not explicitly allow for a veterinarian to report suspected animal cruelty. So this would update the Practice Act to allow but not mandate a report for suspected animal cruelty of an animal if this occurred within their with good faith within their practice, and it also provide immunity for them for if this was provided in good faith. So that's the summary of the bill.
Do we have any questions for Chairman Terry? Representative Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Terry. I support the bill. I just was curious as to what is the practice of like states surrounding us? Is this like something that has been already implemented in Alabama, Kentucky, North Carolina? What is the practice in terms of the duty to report or the right to report suspected animal cruelty by veterinarians?
Representative Terry?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And it's my understanding that the surrounding states have this in some form or fashion within their Practice Act.
Representative Jones, you have follow-up? Okay. See, any other question be called on the bill? Any objections? Seeing no objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 2079. Send it on to full committee. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? On the floor.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
And I should have done this a while ago. I should have taken these rolled these bills that were emailed and asked us to roll these bills. House Bill 2584 by Chairman Russell has been rolled 2 weeks without objection. Rolled 2 weeks. House Bill 1902 by Representative Burkhart, rolled 1 week without objection. Rolled 1 week, bringing us back to the top of the calendar, which is House Bill 1890. And Chairman Todd is,
We have a motion and a second on House Bill 1890. Any discussion on the bill? I guess I'll recognize, get my tongue twisted here, recognize Representative Grills for explanation of the bill.
okay, yes, sir. Chairman Todd, we have two amendments for this bill. I have House Amendment 013618.
That's what I have. Do I have a motion on the amendment? I have a motion and a second on the amendment. Without objection, we'll vote on that amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment goes on the bill. You recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment makes the bill. What we're trying to do is establish a program in the state of Tennessee where people can voluntarily put their agriculture land into a conservation not a trust, but an easement that would be put up on their property that would preserve that agriculture farm, or that farm and that agriculture purposes, and for the length that they agree to with the state. And the state, we're giving the authority to the Department of Agriculture to promulgate rules to how they would administer this fund, how they would administer the actual program. But the ultimate goal is to make sure that we have the farmers and the farmers have the land to feed the world going into the future. With that, I'll take questions, and I know there's been lots of things been said about this bill. There's been lots of things, but I had several questions myself. But I am confident that what we're doing is with a pure heart, and with the best of intentions to make sure that we save our farmland for the future.
Thank you, Chairman Grills. And you mentioned there's a second amendment on this. I don't have that drafting code in front of me, or the sponsor.
Chairman Todd, that is not my amendment.
Okay. Okay. Representative Halsey, you have an amendment for this?
I did, and if you want me to explain it,
Yes, sir. You're
Okay.
recognized.
what it does, it says that this program can last no more than 15 years. The original wording was 15 years or more. And I did that because if a farmer wanted to get out of this program, and it was either more than 15 years or in perpetuity, which a lot of folks are working to try and make the wording say that. Of course, perpetuity is forever, and you'd never be able to get out from under it. So I wanted a window or a mechanism where a farmer, if he didn't like it, he would have an avenue to be able to know that at 15 years it was going to end, and he could renew after that if he wanted to do it again.
Representative Halsey, do you want to move forward with this amendment at this time?
I would like to.
Okay. Is there a motion on this amendment? We have a motion and a second on this amendment. Any more discussion, Representative Travis?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've talked to Representative Halsey this morning, and with things coming today, I think we should roll his amendment for the time being and see where we land today and take it up at I think there's a lot of work that we need to do on this bill at this time. So I think that we should roll it to the table at this point.
Okay, so is that a motion to table this amendment? So we have a motion to table this amendment.
Second.
We have a second on that. Any more discussion on tabling motion of this amendment? Seeing none, we'll vote on tabling amendment drafting code 13685. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The ayes have it. Motion is tabled for that amendment. Representative Travis, you're recognized on House Bill 1890 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, when I talked to Representative Halsey this morning, I have concerns with the 15 years. I mean, I think that's a good amendment, but also have concerns about if we pass this bill and the farmer gets disabled or dies in 3 years, that's going to leave the family stuck on what they can do with this land. If the wife does, or the spouse does not farm, or the children does not farm, then it sort of leaves them in a bad spot on their inheritance. So I think we need to come together and talk about some amendments to make this a little better policy. So I would like to make a motion that we roll this bill for 2 weeks.
There's a motion. Do I hear a second on that motion? We have a second to roll this bill 2 weeks. Discussion, Representative Grills, you're recognized.
And I'm perfectly fine with rolling the bill for 2 weeks, but I wanted to, there's several things that have been brought up and we've received several emails about different things. And ultimately, the goal of this bill is to make sure that farmland is preserved for the future and that we do not lose control of that land to any third party, whether it be the federal government or some conservatory that comes in and says, we want to help the state of Tennessee manage these easements. That's not the goal. And the actual legislation itself, if you look at section 1, subsection F, it says, notwithstanding another law to the contrary, the department shall not sell, transfer, or otherwise divest an agricultural easement acquired pursuant to this section. We have put some guardrails in this bill with the amendment that we put on originally that protects us from losing our sovereignty, if you will, in control of these easements to the federal government or any other arbitrary group that may be involved. So it's very important that we look at the words that this bill has in it and how the direction of this bill, the intention of this bill, and the pure heart that's behind this bill.
Thank you for that, sir. And there have been some misconceptions about this in the public. I know we've gotten a lot of emails and we've had emails that were labeled another bill, but had the same concerns about this bill. So there's a lot of confusion out there. Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. I had this similar point of confusion that you just mentioned. I was getting many emails, automated emails about this, and I just really wanted to see, even before we roll it, I just had a few questions for Department of Ag, just so we can even know where our questions go from here, because the emails that I got were just all over the place, and I was honestly confused coming into this committee about even what is the intention behind this. But I tried to read the bill. Is there a way that the Department of Agriculture can answer some questions or just give us some more background so we can go back for these 2 weeks and research some more, just so we can kind of get more of a foundation for that research before we roll it 2 weeks?
I think that's a good suggestion. We'll look at that here in just a moment. I'm going to go with the other folks that are on the list. Representative Travis.
And, I agree with the chairman. This is, something that we need to protect and look at. And I just think it needs a little more work and a little more time, but I withdraw my motion to roll it for 2 weeks at this present time.
Withdraw the motion?
Yeah, so we can discuss it.
So I have withdrawal is the second withdrawn. Okay, the second is withdrawn. Representative Fritz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple questions, maybe appropriate now or at another time if we go out of session or discussion. And I wanted to talk a little bit about non-possessory interest and what that means and who holds title and deed. We talk about not being able to sell it, but I think as Representative Travis has mentioned, there's some things that we might be able to refine on this to clear the intent up, because I know the person that's carrying this bill, his intent to feed Tennessee and feed the world. And there's probably some things we could do there.
Thank you, sir. Any more comments before we consider going out of session? Representative Grills.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. I appreciate that, Representative Fritz, and the confidence you put in me in that. It's probably unmerited. But ultimately, I would not do a thing that would harm a Tennessee farmer or a farm family. My family's been on a farm in Northwest Tennessee for 9 generations. And for these emails to go around circulating and saying that I want to sell us out to a foreign entity or a federal program, I understand I don't put a lot of confidence in what the federal government does, but this legislation, go back and read the bill. Subsection F, the department shall not sell, transfer, or otherwise divest an agriculture easement. That protects us from anything in that nature. And I'm confident, until someone shows me otherwise, that what we're doing is the right thing.
Thank you for that. And I think we would all probably benefit from hearing from the department on this. So without objection, Chairman Halsey, before we go, did you have a comment or question?
Just at some point, since we're not going to roll, I like Representative Jones. I have several questions I'd like to get on the record to get the answer, because the fear that you're talking about is real, but the reason it's real is because the federal side of the program that pumps in federal money to this, people don't realize, and farmers don't realize, it's been going on a while, they lose control of their property. They lose control of their property. Some of the words in the bill use some of the same words in their program. And so it scares people to death, and that's why they're worried. And so for the record, when we get to it, I'd just like to ask some specific questions we can get on the record of what the bill does and what it doesn't do.
Okay, I appreciate that. I believe one of the words that has been expressed as a concern is a servient estate. And Representative Grills, is that still in here? I'm scanning this very quickly.
Chairman Todd, the only word that I see with servient is servient land. It's located in section 1, subsection A.
And I'll just, for the committee's benefit, I'll read the explanation because I think there is some confusion about this. A servient estate or servient land is a parcel of land that is subject to an easement. That's all. A dominant estate is a real estate parcel that has an easement over another piece of property. So if you have a landlocked piece of property and then there's an easement across another property to get to a road, then the landlocked property is the dominant estate, and the estate that has the easement on it is the servient estate. It's just a description. It doesn't mean they're subservient or they're losing control or anything like that. It's I guess a technical term in real estate that I wanted to make sure we had clear on the record. But I guess at this time, we'd love to hear from the department. Without objection, we'll go out of session to hear from the department. We're out of session. Y'all would find a microphone and turn it on, and I'll let you go in whatever order you would like. State your name and who you're with, and we'll start with some comments, and then we'll see what questions the committee has. Thank you, Ms. Carroll.
Good morning, committee. I'm Carol McDonald with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, Assistant Commissioner for Policy and Legislation.
Good morning, committee. Chairman, thank you for having me. I'm Alex Lewis with Governor Lee's office. Happy to be here. This program, this state level program, to be clear, state level program that Governor Lee's proposing, the intent of this program is to help family farmers all across Tennessee preserve their land, keep the agricultural use of the property. And that's a broad term, but that's a broad term intentionally because agriculture has as you all know, agriculture has a lot of different purposes and a lot of different ways that property can be used agriculturally, especially across a state as geographically diverse as Tennessee. So this program is voluntary for family farmers to participate. The Department of Agriculture would develop rules with stakeholders that would go through the rulemaking process to establish the parameters and the criteria for the properties that would participate. But ultimately, the end result is an agreement between a family, between a farmer and the Department of Agriculture to participate in this program. So with that, I'm happy to answer any of the questions that the members might have.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank y'all for being here. Of course, like everybody else, I've heard 1,000 things, so I'm glad to, and I was trying to listen. So I heard the sponsor of the bill say it's voluntarily. Number one, is that right?
That's correct, sir.
So if I decided I wanted to get in it, and then 2 years later decided I wanted to get out, what would be my options?
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman. The way the bill is drafted now, the easement would be recorded with the Register of Deeds office in each county, and the easement would be placed on the property for the term of the easement, not less than 15 years. So
Okay.
whatever that agreement, voluntary agreement is, the easement will be placed on the property for that length of time.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So and I think Chairman next to me raised this, if if something happened to the landowner and it's left to his wife and kids, they would still have to honor that easement for whatever term, the 15 years or whatever. They would still have to honor that. Would that be correct?
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, if you look at Section A of the bill that defines agricultural easement, it imposes the limitations on the owner of the surveying estate, and that's the language that I think I'll be happy to address momentarily. On the owner, the owner's heirs, or assigns. So it would apply to family members that inherit the land. But I'll also note that it does apply to assigns, which would include subsequent purchasers of the property. So the family that owns the farm enters the program. While the easement runs on the property, they are still allowed to sell the property. The property's use just must maintain an agricultural purpose.
Representative Shaw?
Make sure I understand that. They could sell, but it would have to remain as agricultural property, even if they sold to someone else. In other words, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if the family got in some kind of predicament where they needed to sell the land for the purpose of whatever, they could sell it, but it would still have to be used for agriculture.
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the owner can sell, but the easement would still apply to the subsequent purchaser.
Okay, thank you.
Representative
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Representative Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any states that have similar programs already that have kind of already piloted this so we can see the impact of it? Are there any states that have done this around Tennessee?
Mr. Lewis?
It's a great question. Yes, I think there are 28 or 29. Several states have this, have similar programs in place. Laws that have been passed as most recently as last year in Georgia, I believe, but programs that date back 20, 30, 40 years almost across the country.
Representative Jones?
Thank you. And I'm just looking at the fiscal note, trying to just see that impact as well. 1 second. And can you just kind of talk about the intent, the origin of this bill? How did this come up from the governor's office? Where was the origin, the root of what started this conversation?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. Recent reports have said that Tennessee is one of the leading states across the country in farmland loss. And so Governor Lee understands the depth at which agricultural runs through the pulse of this state. It's on the state seal after all. And it is his intent to preserve really kind of what God gave us in the land, and to let family farmers do that in a voluntary manner. And so this program has been successful in other states, and various stakeholders across the state have seen it succeed across the country. And we thought now was a good time for Tennessee to implement a program so that family farmers can participate.
Representative Jones?
In the 15 years, can you talk about how that number came out? 15 years or more, where did that number come from?
Mr. Lewis?
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. There are various programs across the country, and I don't have a full breakdown of where they land on this question. There are a lot of programs, conservation programs, that are permanent easements, and that's certainly an option. But I think the governor's intent here was to create a program that shows the commitment that we have to farmland and to agriculture. And that was a term that was picked, a length of a number of years that was picked to show that commitment, but also create a system that doesn't necessarily bind families forever.
Representative Jones?
I'm going to let other members ask questions, but I'm a bit out of order, but I just want to recognize some students who walked in, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. We have a group of students today, including one of my constituents, Rick Zampa, for Career and Technical Education down the hill. Just wanted to welcome them and thank you for joining our committee. Thank you.
Glad you could join us. Representative Fritz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I certainly do understand both the governor's heart and what he's trying to do and the sponsor of the bill. I'll give you a couple of specific example questions. So if this were forestry and it were forested property and under the current language in the bill that the forest management plan called for harvest of timber, what actions would that precipitate and by whom?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll defer a little bit to my colleague at the department, who's much more subject matter expert. But broadly, we understand the ebbs and flows of agriculture and forestry in particular, that there comes a time to harvest the timber that's growing, and then the owner of the property makes a determination what to use that for and what its next uses are for. But the land can continue as agriculture. It is our intent to allow the land to remain as broadly in agricultural use as possible, but I'll let Carol speak to that specifically.
Commissioner?
Carol McDonald, Department of Ag. So forestry is just like any other crop. So it does have times that you have to go in and harvest. So this would not, I mean, we would have no restrictions on that operation at all. The landowner could harvest that crop or that timber whenever he needed to. So it would not restrict that whatsoever.
Representative Fritz?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So we use a couple words that I'm sure are maybe confusing some folks because they're kind of legal terms. So we talk about non-possessory interest. And could you talk a little bit about how that non-possessory interest interfaces with a deed and title interface? Well, there's going to be that with the easement. And then there's a commitment in the bill not to sell. So I think when you draw a line through those 3 points, that raises lots of questions for people.
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a non-possessory interest, and I'll harken back to when I most recently took real estate law, which was several years ago, is intended to be kind of a self-evident term that the owner of the interest does not have an interest to possess the land. So in this case, the Department of Agriculture, as the owner of the easement, could not possess the land. There are other forms of easements that I think we're all kind of more familiar with, a landlocked parcel of property where an owner has an easement across someone else's property to get to the roadway. That would be a type of possessory interest because that landowner has the right to possess the land for the purposes of traversing to the road. So this is a non-possessory interest that the department cannot possess the land, most plainly. And then the language to your second point about selling that interest, there is not a prohibition in the bill of the owner of the land, the farmer, selling the land. There is a prohibition on the department selling their easement, the easement that they have. And that language was added to alleviate some concerns. It was certainly never our intent that we would ever sell those. And so that was something we were happy to add to make members comfortable, that we wouldn't sell, transfer, which would imply, giving it away for free. We're not doing that, or otherwise divesting ourselves of that interest. So the Department of Agriculture, for the length of the easement, will own it.
Representative Fritz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick follow-up to that. So this kind of goes back to Representative Shaw's question, Representative Travis, I think, question regarding putting this back in the family's hands at some point in time. Could the rules, once promulgated, if there was a different direction with the Department of Ag, could those rules be changed based on what is not specifically captured in the bill?
Mr. Lewis, and if you would address that question, maybe even in the context of a contract and unilateral changes and things like that. You recognize, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Todd, and that's exactly right. Ultimately, this bill would allow for the department to enter into contracts with farmers to place an easement on the property. And like any other sales contract, the terms of the contract are what are binding. And that easement is then registered with it's filed with the Register of Deeds, like we talked about. And so the easement that is filed with the register is the easement that's binding on the family and the only rights that the state have. So subsequent changes to department policies, rules, or statutes would not affect that easement. That easement would be in fact and binding the way it was filed.
Is it a reasonable, I'm going to insert something here before I call on the next person, but is it a reasonable thought about this arrangement that the state, in essence, is sort of a referee that's contracted to make sure the property owner's desires are carried forward for whatever length of time that contract spells out? Is that a reasonable comparison?
I think it's fair to say that the easement would ensure that the property is used the way that when the easement was entered into remains. And so as the owner of that easement, the Department of Agriculture would have certain legal rights that I'm not qualified to talk about, the remedies that may exist at law. Council may, but we can have time to work those out. But we don't anticipate that farmers are going to agree to participate in this program and then try and circumvent the policy. We understand that there may be some life events that change, but we wouldn't foresee Tennessee farmers trying to go back on a deal that they make.
Okay,
So.
thank you. Representative Travis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Alex, I do have, before I go back into what I'm worried about, after 15 years, let's say that you sign a contract with a farmer for 15 years, and after that 15 years that we have paid them money for that easement, will they owe that money back to the taxpayers after the 15 years is up? Will they have to pay that money back that we give them at that point?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. No, Representative Travis, and that's the intent of the legislation is the state is recognizing that preserving agricultural land has inherent value, and it's for everyone's benefit that we preserve that land. And so that's what it's what the money's for, is to say you won't. There may be a potential for you, family farmer, to get more money out of this property, but the state is coming alongside you and participating in preserving that land. So no, at the completion of the easement, whatever that term is, they wouldn't owe money back to the state.
Okay.
Representative Travis?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. And then what I'm concerned about is that I'm a farmer and I have crops on 200 acres on the Tennessee River. And I had a bad year last year, so I'm going to come to the Department of Tennessee, the Agriculture Department, and say, I need help. I need help with paying my bills for this year. I need help for replanting next year. And so I take this agreement and I take it, let's say 15 years. And 2 years after that, I get killed in a car wreck or something like that. And my spouse, she does not farm. She doesn't ride a tractor. My 2 daughters do not ride a tractor. They don't farm. And so that at that point becomes their inheritance at this point. So that's going to limit my heirs to play the game under this contract and keep that as agriculture. So, agriculture land is very important. And with the Chairman Grills, I think it's a very important thing that we protect our land for our food in the future. But I also look at it as reality. I made a contract agreement with you guys, with the state of Tennessee, and then 2 years later, I am gone. And then that is my children's inheritance. So if they sell it as agriculture property, they may get $2 million for it. If they sell it to Exxon or somebody like that for another thing, they may get $6 million out of it. So I'm looking at this is taxpayers' money that we're using. This $25 million is taxpayers' money. It's not the state's money. It's not agriculture's money. It's not the governor's money. It's the taxpayers' money. So I'm looking at something that, and I was telling the Chairman Grills today that I would like to see an amendment come up with a time period. I would like to see an amendment come up saying that if I die, my children have the right to buy out this easement from the agriculture department for what that the state taxpayer has paid for this, and maybe a 10% penalty, and then maybe the interest that is accrued over that period of time. So that's what I was looking at to protect the heirs of that person that may become disabled, that can't farm anymore, or may pass away. So that's where I'm concerned right now. I do believe that we need to protect our food source. I totally believe that. And I think this could be a great plan to do that. But I do think we need to strengthen this bill for the people that are left behind, that if something happens. So that's where my concern lays. So
Very
thank you.
good points. And well, before you answer that question, Mr. Lewis or Ms. McDonald, I want to ask Farm Bureau if they would maybe step forward, if Kevin would step forward, and might be able to shed some light on that angle, one of the angles that Representative Travis was asking about. But while he's getting set up, Mr. Lewis, would you like to address any part of that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and condolences for your untimely passing. No, I think when we talked about this yesterday and then again this morning, I think the governor's office and the department are certainly happy to continue having conversations, because we ultimately, this program is about Tennessee family farmers. And so we don't want to do anything that would put, as best we can, we want to avoid putting people in a tough spot. So happy to continue having those conversations with the chairman. So
Representative Travis?
Thank you, Alex, and what you said. And I believe in the Tennessee farmers. I do believe that. But also there's another at stake here. It's the taxpayers of Tennessee. So we need to protect them also while we're protecting the farmers at the same. So to make that happen. But thank you for the kind words you said.
I want to go back to our sponsor on this, Representative Grills, before we go to another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I've got 3 questions here I want to ask, if you don't mind, just to get them on the record.
Go ahead.
How many acres does the governor and the Department of Agriculture plan on protecting with this fund?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. We don't have an acreage plan in mind. We want to make the best use of the taxpayers' money and protect Tennessee farmland as best we can, but we don't have an acreage in mind.
Okay.
Representative Grills?
Does this bill allow the promulgation of rules that would potentially allow for the drawdown of federal funds to ever be implemented, or does this bill in any way allow for a partnership with the federal government in any way?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is not, insofar as I'm aware, any intention for this to interplay with the federal government. This is a state program at the Department of Agriculture.
Representative Grills?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And last question here. Is there another group that will be involved with these easements in any way, shape, form, or fashion? Or will this strictly be run through the Department of Agriculture, and Dr. Hatcher will be the one in charge?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the department.
100%.
Yes, the department shall not sell, transfer, or otherwise divest the easement, agricultural easement acquired subject to this section.
Representative Holsey?
Thank you. If I can indulge you to allow me several questions, and then I will stay out of your hair, if that's all right.
I'll let you go back and forth with any of these individuals you want to.
Okay, thank you so much. And Chairman Grills, I appreciate the 3 questions you asked, because they were some of mine. I'll X them off and you won't have to listen to them again. I appreciate you being here. And again, people are worried about this because of what's happened on the federal side and the UN and the World Economic Forum. They're scared to death, and I don't blame them. When I first saw this bill, my antennas went sky high too over the same issues. I think the cause is just. On the servient term, he's exactly correct. If you get an easement over a piece of property to get to your landlocked property, that there is a dominant property owner, but the easement's for this driveway. But in this case, servient really means the property owner, and the dominant one in this context is the easement holder. Is that not correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The farm owner is the owner of yes, the real estate term is the servient estate. Yes, sir. But I think the way I think through that is the owner subject to the easement. There's nothing else implied in that, and especially since this easement deals only with the use of the property, not possession, not disposition of. This is the easement is subject to the use of the property.
Okay. This representative's concerned about dying 2 years or 3 years later. That goes back to an old axiom called the dead hand can't control from the grave. It's a great point. And if we're going to add some amendments to beef up this bill and set some planks here to where this is done righteously in a right way and doesn't deceive anybody or hurt anybody, I really do think we need some planks to set this up so people are comfortable with it, that this can't go astray and go the wrong way. But in other states that you mentioned, I was reading that up to 40% of the land value goes down with an easement like this, a conservation easement, which affects the counties that it lives in as far as is money that the county makes off of property taxes. Do you find that to be true? How do you think about that here in Tennessee?
Mr. Lewis, and then Mr. Hensley maybe, or
Yeah,
Mr. Hensley first.
If it's okay,
Sure.
Representative Halsey, thank you. Kevin Hensley, Tennessee Farm Bureau Federation, Director of Public Policy. I don't believe the Greenbelt formula that most of this land, and I would assume almost all of this land would be enrolled in, that formula would not be impacted by this type of program. That formula, that Greenbelt property enrolled in the Greenbelt program is a state formula and code that the comptroller's office manages. So I don't see how that would impact the local property tax in that specific situation.
Excellent question, Representative Halsey.
Okay, thank you. With the state's position of holding the easement for conservation purposes, and when we use that word, we're talking about agriculture. And by the way, I'm right there with you. Just in case you ain't noticed, I think that it's the globalists' intent to starve us to death is what I think. And you can go eat bugs with Bill Gates if you want to, but not me. So I'm right there with you on what the goal is. But could holding the easement for conservation purposes, are we in any position where the state could come in 5 years from now and say on 10 acres of your land, since we hold the easement, we're going to put up solar panels and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it? Does the state have that kind of authority under this bill?
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, sir.
Okay. Let's say a farmer's growing soybeans and corn. And as you enter into this agreement at the beginning, 5 years from now, he decides that soybeans doesn't pay and corn doesn't pay, and he's going to raise hogs and cattle. Can he do that without getting permission?
Mr. Lewis.
I will defer to my agricultural friends, but those all seem like agricultural purposes to me.
Thank you, Chairman. Our intentions are for the farmer, the landowner, to continue the ag production on that land as they wish, as long as it stays in ag production.
Representative Halsey.
So he doesn't have to get permission to do anything on this land. He owns the land. The taxpayers paying him money to keep the land and do agriculture things, but it doesn't matter what agriculture it is. He doesn't have to get permission from anybody to do anything he wants to.
That's our intentions, yes, sir.
Is that correct? Okay. So control of the property, which in most conservation easements, you have the property owner, but he doesn't control it. But in this case, the state really doesn't have control of the property. Is that a fair statement?
Mr. Lewis.
That's correct.
That'd be a great thing to put in an amendment. One other, 2 or 3 other questions. I'm assuming the holder that's mentioned in the bill is the state.
Mr. Lewis.
I'd be happy to answer. Can you point to where you see holder?
I read it. Let's go into another one. Don't worry about it. What does the taxpayer get then at the end of the day? What does the taxpayer get for their money?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The intent of the program is to preserve farmland. And so taxpayers get the preservation of Tennessee's land for those agricultural purposes. The taxpayer gets the future protection that that land can be used for agricultural purposes. And we have the cultural benefit that agriculture stays at the forefront of Tennessee's economy and Tennessee's culture across all three grand divisions.
Okay, one final question. Oh, go ahead.
And I would love to add there, Representative Halsey, and I've talked a lot about this in the past, food security, and I think the whole situation throughout the COVID time period that we lived through in 2021 really highlighted that we want to make sure our food production stays in Tennessee and in the United States. And there's not just economic benefits to farmland. There's views that everybody likes to look out their back door and see cattle or hay growing, or there's that type of benefit. There's environmental benefits. Our farmers feed the wildlife of this state, and they're proud of it. It costs them a lot of money because they eat all their crops, but it's a big deal. There's a lot of benefits to farmland, staying in farmland, and I think all of you have probably heard, like we have, that the state's changing quicker than what they like for it to, and so this type of program gives a lot of good benefits, and we can share a lot of statistics about the rate of change that we're seeing happen across the state.
I have no problem at all with the desire to preserve what you got. None at all. I don't want the farmer getting screwed over at the end of the day by things that were in here that he didn't think were in there or wasn't explained to him. At the end of the day, if the state doesn't have control of the land, if the farmer can do what he wants to, if there's no money tied from any federal program, this is all state taxpayer money, then why do you need an easement? Why can't we just have a contract with a farmer?
Thank you,
Lewis?
Mr. Chairman. I think the purpose of the easement is that is the typical way that real estate transactions happen. We've seen this be successful in other states, and also that the easement does apply even after, even if the farmer the particular farmer that enters the agreement, the easement applies to subsequent owners of the land.
And I think from a thank you, Chairman. We want to be conscious of the taxpayer dollar here, and from you can have a contract, but the binding way to that land is legally protected as an easement. And so we've done quite a bit of research, and want to thank the Department of Ag too for doing a lot of research. UT's done a lot of research about what options are there for these types of programs, and from a tried and true perspective of what works, these are the types of programs that we see work. And from a legal perspective, if you're going to have that type of interest on land, an easement is just the way to do that. From a big picture perspective on that, I think would be our perspective on it. And again, it would be voluntary that the family would know going into it what they're doing on that.
Representative Halsey?
Just one comment. I look forward to maybe some amendments that really put what we just said and the answers that you just gave, put it into law so it's binding. So there's no doubt about it.
You had
Thank
a
you.
question about the word holder, and I think I'd love to have legal give us an opinion. So if you wouldn't mind.
Levin Middleton, Office of Legal Services. As this is drafted, my understanding would be in subsection A under 43-1-115. It says, for purposes of this section, agricultural easement means a voluntary non-possessory interest of a holder in real property. My understanding would be that the holder in this case would be the department because you've got the owner of the property, but you're talking about the holder of the non-possessory interest, which is the easement. So my understanding is that that would be the department.
Thank you for that. And Representative Shaw.
Thank you. And again, it's been said, let me commend the department for this idea. I think we are working towards something that can really be brilliant. I really do. Did have a couple other questions that just come to mind. Number one, what if the farmer just decided to quit right in the middle of this agreement? Could either one of y'all talk a little bit about what could happen? Because we are talking about taxpayer dollars. So what would happen if that farmer just quit?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. When you say quit, do you just mean
Quit farming, just
And-
decide he didn't
and-
or she didn't want to farm anymore.
and let the land become overgrown, go to, I mean, just stop all
Yes.
operations?
Yes.
Well, every situation is going to be different, but I'd say a landowner that is farming is going to have a plan, whether he's going to lease the land out or to keep that land active. I'm sure he's got some plan, but that's something we'll probably need to work out in rules to figure out how that is determined.
Mr. Hensley?
And I do point out that I don't read anything in there that would inhibit a property owner that's enrolled in this to lease it to another farmer. So in that situation that you're describing, that maybe that they're 5 years into the lease or into the agreement, excuse me, and they decide, hey, I'm gonna step back and I'm gonna lease my property to somebody else. They'd still have the right to do that as long as that lease would go to somebody that's going to farm it or put it in
Representative
some
Shaw?
agriculture production.
Representative Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My last question is how small a portion could be put into this agreement? Where would that start? I mean, some people got more land than others, so what would there be something in the rules about how much? If it is, could you talk about that?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, those criteria would be worked out in the rulemaking process. We don't have those designed right now. The department would work with stakeholders to make sure that those criteria work, that are practical but also efficient to make use of the money in the best way possible. And then those criteria would be in rule and go through the rulemaking process and come to the General Assembly in the GovOps committee.
Okay.
Representative Shaw?
Thank you. One last question that you brought to my attention as you were answering that one. I'm trying to figure out how I would ask this question. Maybe I don't know how to ask that right now. I'll wait. Okay.
Representative Fritz?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one more real question. I want to base this in something because I am supportive of what y'all are trying to do. But in a world where there are groups and organizations and billionaires that want to deny us any personal and private property ownership, we have to be careful with this because they state those goals very clearly. They don't want Monty Fritz or anybody else up here to own anything. They want to hand things out to us. And so we have to really buck up on this kind of thing. And so it's with that, I would offer two things. First is we use the phrase real estate transaction. That's going to sting people, right? Because that's usually changing hands. And then the second is an example for your thoughts, and this may be to Carol. But if I am that old guy, which I am, and I find myself unable to bale hay on agricultural land, and my fields grow up, and we know within a year, maybe no more than 2 years, they're not fit for hay anymore. Is there somebody going to take action against me? Am I in violation of this contract? Your thoughts?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. And I intended to, or I had tried to get this out. I'm not sure all the legal remedies that exist and how those would be effectuated, but the easement is to ensure that the property stays in agricultural purposes. How that agricultural purpose is defined, y'all certainly know more about that than I do. But we can get an answer and walk with you through that. And I'll walk myself.
Mr. Hensley?
Yeah, I'd like to add your first comment about making sure that people in Tennessee control it. I think that's really the ultimate purpose of this bill, is to make sure that we've got farmers living in Tennessee, working in Tennessee, holding land in Tennessee, and producing food for Tennesseans. And I think when you get right down to it, what your initial concerns might have been is a small step in trying to make sure over the next 15 to 30 years that we're able to maintain doing that. And hear that concern. I think if that's your objective, I think this is a great piece of legislation that will help do that.
Representative Fritz, you have any more? Okay. We'll go back to Representative Shaw. I think he remembered his question.
Thank you. And what is rulemaking? We talk about rulemaking. I guess my question would be, how do we know that the rulemaking process will go against what the bill says? Because we're going to make the rules later. Am I correct?
Representative Shaw, I think, that we're building the box and the rules will be inside that box. So
Okay.
that's part of what I think we're working out here with all the questions and maybe an amendment if that's what the committee desires. Anybody feel free to add and chime into that, but that's my understanding of our
and there's-
rulemaking process here. Mr. Hensley?
There's always GovOps oversight over the
Okay.
rulemaking process. And
I
so
just want to make sure. I think everybody's got some concerns, and I think they're good concerns, and I just want to make sure that whatever we agree upon would be agreed upon by everybody. But thank you.
Thank you for that, sir. Representative Jones?
Thank you. I just had one question. As I'm listening, I support the idea of creating these land banks for small, family farms and to preserve their farmland. But one concern that I have is there anything in this bill that would prevent creating these land banks for giant corporations to just get cheap farmland that's subsidized by taxpayers? Is this for small family farms and individuals, or is there anything to prevent large corporations from also taking advantage of this program?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't believe the bill is drafted in any way that would limit who can participate in the program. It's certainly the department. I can't speak for the department and the stakeholders, but their constituencies are Tennessee's family farmers. And so I think it will certainly be their intent to the outreach and encourage participation in this program from family farmers.
Representative Jones?
Thank you. I know because we keep using family farmers as the icon of who will benefit from this, but you're saying that there's nothing to prevent a large corporation from also using this program and getting further cheap farmland subsidized by our constituents. There's nothing in here to stop that. It's just for the record.
Mr. Lewis?
There's nothing in the bill that dictates who can participate in the program.
If I might add, that there's ample statistics that somewhere between 98 to 99% of all Tennessee's farms are family owned and operated. There are some that have a corporate structure. They've done that for liability purposes or for tax purposes to set up just like other businesses may set up different tax structures for different reasons. But the USDA statistics show that there's 98 to 99% of all Tennessee's farms are family owned and operated. I may have an LLC with my brother or whatever to try to have some little bit liability protection, but still the familiar relationships that are 98 to 99% of the farms in Tennessee are family owned and operated.
Thank you for that. Representative Travis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Jones brought out a good point that I just had, that he popped into my mind. So if I have a 5,000 acre tract of forest ground and it's in a 150-year trust, can I qualify for this program, for this easement program at that point?
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. I think that's the sort of criteria that would be built out in the rulemaking process. We would look at how other states have built out those criteria and whatnot, but I'm not sure at this point.
Because
the bill doesn't speak to that.
Yeah, because if I had that 5,000 acres and I see this program coming in, I'm thinking, well, I've got a 150-year trust. Hey, I'll pick up some cash here from the state of Tennessee and we move right along. But anyway, thanks for y'all being here today. I appreciate yours.
Some of us are still concerned that you might be farming, Representative Travis. Representative Halsey.
One more question and then I'll shut up. I just want to hear you say again that there's no other entities involved in the loaning of the money or the processing of the money or the giving of the money. The reason I say that, this past Friday morning, we had a legislative breakfast up in Kingsport. There's about 500 people there. When it was over, a man came up to me and he said he was complaining about this bill in that it said 15 years or longer. And he wanted the wording to be in perpetuity, like this other program I told you about, which made my antennas go sky high. And so, of course, since then to now, I'm asking myself, why is a man that's a banker at a private bank in Johnson City asking me about the wording of this bill if there's no avenue for this bank to be involved in the purchase of easements or the funding of easements? Why would he even care about it? And why would he ask me about it? And why would he be insistent that it's the word perpetuity? I just want to hear you say that there's no other entity or mechanism in this money, that it's straight out of the taxpayer through the state of Tennessee to this program and nobody else is involved.
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is a general fund program, a Tennessee funded program.
And if I could add, Representative
Certainly.
Halsey, that's okay. Chairman, thank you. That there are other perpetual programs out there, and I don't know the gentleman you're talking about, and couldn't speak to his situation, but I think that there are folks out there that are involved in land trust programs that are already established today that would prefer this bill be a perpetual program. And I can't speak on their behalf or anything like that. I think a significant reason Farm Bureau is supportive of the legislation is that this is giving those families options, because there are federal programs that you can work with USDA on if you're interested in doing that. There are permanent land trust programs available that if you would like to do that they're very good programs that if that's right for your family, you can do that. But this is a new tool in the toolbox for farmers that would like maybe that shorter term, that, hey, they know for that their business plan is to keep in business for the next 15, 20, 30 years, but they don't know what their grandchildren's needs are going to be. And so that's why we're very excited about this, is that it's a tool in the toolbox for the families that it's right for, and that they're making that decision on a voluntary basis to work with a trusted source. Farmers work with our State Department of Ag on a daily basis, and we have a lot of faith and trust in their work. And so this is just a good. We like to think of it as a tool in the toolbox for our farmers that's not currently available elsewhere.
Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The view from Houston County, from which I come from, and this is the way that I view this piece of legislation. Two things in life that are guaranteed: death and taxes. And what I mean by that, any of you that are farmers, and I live on a 4th generation farm, and right now, at my age, I'm wondering which one of my kids are going to pull up the slack and stay invested in this piece of property. Now, we've got two pieces of property. One is 1,200 acres of virgin timber. The family collectively, we take and pay taxes. Now, if we ever miss a year or two of taxes going back to our counties, back to the state of Tennessee, guess what happens to that property? And I don't need to tell you. So as far as the fiscal note on this, it makes sense. And that's part of us farmers that are paying taxes will get a portion back to help us determine what's going to happen with that piece of property. Now, that 1,200 acres in forestry, every year we lease it out to hunters, and it's a group of hunters that respect our property. They pay us, which in turn pays the property tax. So kind of mentally digest what I'm saying here. So with that, yes, we're going to keep the feds out of Tennessee's Department of Ag. Who is going to get these easements? And of course, I had the 50 questions when they came to my office too. And it's like, this is a win-win for Tennessee.
And I appreciate, of course, Farm Bureau has to support this because that's who they are. That's who we are. And as a Farm Bureau member, but that's what we're talking about is Jay Reedy's farm. It's because of my wife's and my wife's family going 3 generations back, and my kids will be the 5th, making sure that my kids don't come in, their mom and dad's dead, or I get tired of doing it, that they sell off the livestock and then say, oh, hey, here's an opportunity to sell this off for development or whatever. And it'll, to me, it's the pause button that I need to put on my farm or our farm. It's really not mine because it was the great grandfather that had the idea that he wanted to be a farmer and a lot of history there. And of course, I've told you the history before. The farmhouse on the place was built by the first sheriff of Houston County. Now, tell me that's not history. And that person's buried out in the yard with his wife and his wife's niece. But so there's history there. And of course, this morning, if you attended with the Battlefield Trust, the history that we've got in the state is amazing. And Chairman Grills, your family, 9 generations, that's huge. And of course, you want your daughters to maintain and be part of this as well. And we keep hoping that we send our kids off to school, they get that higher education, then they get disgusted with the rat race. And it's like, Mom, Dad, I'm coming back to the farm because that's what I love. But thank you for allowing me to have the comments.
Thank you, sir. I don't see anybody else on our list while we're out of session. Any other comments from our panel?
If I could take some liberty, we ask, what brought this about? That's been asked. What instigated this? And I think we've all seen it. We've all seen the land use change across the state. It's happening rapidly, and we wanted to have some hard statistics. We didn't want to just have the visual, and so we worked with UT, and really UTI deserves all the credit for getting this language together. And we've tried to provide this to you as much as we can, but there's from 1997 to 2017, there were 1.1 million acres of land converted in the state of Tennessee from farmland to another use. But then from 2017 to 2023, there were 432,000 acres of land. That rate almost doubled of the land use change in recent history. And when you to kind of put that in a size comparison, that 1.1 million acres in the 20 years prior from 1997 to 2017, that's the land mass of Carroll, Benton, Humphreys, and Houston County. And then when you look at just since 2017, that 432,000 acres that have converted out of agricultural land, that's the land size of Bledsoe and Van Buren counties. We've got significant change there, and there's some real numbers. And if you've got any specifics about what your counties look like, UT's put together a whole website devoted to that conversion. And we really think that now is the time for the state to look at this. And this isn't going to stop all land use conversion change that we see across the state. That's not going to stop that, but all of it. But we hope that maybe we can look back in 30, 50 years and say, hey, we did the right thing right here, right now. And we appreciate the General Assembly and the Governor's Office considering this and looking forward to, obviously there's some questions that we want to have answered too, because we want this program to work right. And we appreciate representatives bringing up those questions. And thank you all for the opportunity to speak on this and discuss this, because I think our children will appreciate the fact that we're having this discussion today, and our grandchildren as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hensley and Commissioner and Mr. Lewis for your input and your help in answering these questions. With no other questions for them, we will go back into session. We're back in session now. Representative Grills, you're recognized on House Bill 1890 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for some clarification and to put some things on the record, we asked the question about how many acres will the department cap at with this program. There's not a cap on it on this program. There's $25 million that they're putting in this initial fund, and as long as the General Assembly continues to put dollars in it, I'm assuming the easements will continue to grow. The question was asked about the bill. Does the bill itself, or does the bill allow the promulgation of rules that could put us in partnership with federal dollars, or in somehow put us in partnership with the federal government any way, shape, form, or fashion? That is absolutely, there's no way that's going to happen according to the way the bill is written. That is not the intention of the bill. And I want to, on record, that is not the intention of this bill. And if it were to change, that would be out of the control of me or the people that vote for this bill. Is there another group that's going to be involved? after the rules are promulgated that would potentially put regulations or rules and to abide by. Absolutely not. This will be run by the Department of Agriculture here in Tennessee. The question was asked about what will happen when it comes to the agricultural processes, whether the ground, when it grows up and becomes fallow, the normal procedure will be followed. If you look at section 1, subsection A, which limitations and affirmative obligations are intended to preserve, maintain, or enhance the condition of agriculture or forestry, and is recorded in the register's office. That language is in there. The question's been asked about who owns the easements. Well, the state owns the easements. If you look at subsection B, if you look at the end there, notwithstanding the subsection F, notwithstanding another law to the contrary, the department shall not sell. It's referencing back that the department owns the easement. So over and over again, we have lots of questions, but we've got lots of answers. And I'll be willing to take any question from the committee now. Chairman Hulsey had several questions, and ultimately Chairman Hulsey and I agree on almost everything. So some of the questions he's asked, I've been asking for the last several days. So I'll take any questions from the committee.
Representative Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because of time restraint here, I think we ought to roll this bill. I'll make a motion that we roll this bill for 2 weeks.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Any objection to rolling this 2 weeks
No objection. I have something to say.
before we roll it? Okay. Well, without objection, we'll roll this bill 2 weeks. Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Todd and committee. My commitment is to do something that the committee agrees with and wants to move forward to preserve agriculture in Tennessee. My office is available. My phone number is available. Call me anytime, Monday through Sunday, and we'll talk about this. The department's, Alex and I have spoken several times. Carol and I have spoken several times. We want to make sure we do this right. We want to protect the sovereignty of the state of Tennessee and the future of our food. So that's the goal, that's the effort, and that's the intention. Are there any other orders before we dismiss? And
Yes, motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn? We're adjourned.